Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Perspectives in Religion. My name is the Reverend Wayne Purcell, and as always, I greet you in the African tradition of Hotep, and peace be unto you. And as always, I want to thank you for allowing me to share our story, the African story that has not been adequately told. Our story has been corrupted and stolen. It has been denied and has been used in history as somewhat insignificant to the whole scheme of world events. Nothing could be further from the truth. Therefore, it is contingent upon you and I, as African Americans and my Caucasian brothers and sisters as well, to translate the African story into the legacy that it should be. And we should tell the truth, and the truth will set us free. It will set us free as a nation, as a people. For as long as we consider one race inferior to another because of a corrupted history of lies and half-truths, we can never be viewed as equals, and God is no respecter of persons. And so Perspectives in Religion is intended to tell the African story, obviously, and it's to give a historical view of ancient history of we as African Americans, whose history is so in need of being resurrected, if you will. Now, we know the history here in the United States, which is not a very good past when you look at slavery and Jim Crow laws and civil rights marches and segregation and desegregation, and you look at all of the turmoil that we as African Americans had to deal with while being in the so-called land of the free, home of the brave, where every person has the inalienable right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Somehow we have not been granted those rights. And so we need to tell the story, but a story that goes back further than the African American story, but the story that goes back to the African story, excuse me, the African story that talks of our religion, Shatat Natur. It talks of our gods and goddesses. Talks of a nation of people, Nubians, Cushites, who gave to humanity spirituality, who gave to humanity masonry, and the list goes on and on. But we as a people of color have not only been denied our history, we have had much of our history stolen and simply destroyed. And so freedom, as Christ states in the Bible, freedom comes from knowing the truth. And in the ancient African tradition, the truth equated to knowing thyself. And who can be more lost than we as African Americans here in this country, who throughout our childhood were forced to learn everybody's history but our own. And a history in this country that has not been very fair to us, nor have we really had an equitable portion of what society gives. So when we talk about the truth and knowing thyself, it's very important that there can be no learning of truth if we don't know who we are. We've accepted religion of this country, although we were force-fed the religion, because as you know, when we were forced here to this country to work the fields and the houses and the highways and byways, it was forbidden for the African to hold on, or I shouldn't say to hold on, but to use and continue to practice their form of worship. And throughout the generations, it became taboo. It became something that was forbidden because it was some sort of cultish, unethical. They used the word voodoo type of religion that was somewhat satanic. Again, nothing could be further from the truth. But ignorance breeds ignorance. And over the generations, we too became caught up in the same misconception of our religion and our heritage, to the point that we became ashamed to even discuss our history, our religion, our African past. And this can happen over time. And so, at the same time, it is also our objective to impart racial pride and an awareness to or of the God and or goddess of our ancient civilization, along with its spiritual contributions to world civilization. For we know, and the Bible emphatically states this, that when you look at the major characters of the Bible, being Joseph, who played a very big role in preserving the Hebrews during their time of famine, but had it not been for Egypt, who raised Joseph in the priesthood and gave him a position of authority, there would have never been the opportunity to be there to save his people, the Hebrews, during a time of extreme famine throughout the land. This was not put in the Bible as some form of entertainment, and the emphasis of that story has never been fully revealed through the eyes of the African. Because if it had been, then the African would be playing a major role in the salvation of the Hebrews. Because it was the Africans who saved the Hebrews from starving and dying out in the desert land. Because the Hebrews were nomad people. They had no place to lay their hat, if you will. They just traveled. They had no place of home per se. I mean, even today. I mean, look how long it took the Jews to finally have a homeland, and then when they got the homeland, it was given by the British over there in Palestine, and they claimed that as their homeland, and slowly moved out the Palestinians, and so you have this war going on today, where Israel now has claimed that area as their home. But originally, it was not their home. If you check out history, they were given that spot as a place of refuge. And they were to be cohabitants with the people that were there, which in this case are the Palestinians. And then suddenly, because they were being supplied by the United States and other countries with millions and billions of dollars and weaponry and all the things that a small nation needed to sustain itself and then later to defend itself, but they became the aggressors. But that's another story. But I'm just saying, if we understand history, we can see how history can repeat itself, and we can be ignorant to the truth of certain things that are happening today and take sides with individuals whom perhaps we need to get more clarity on what is really going on here. And so when we look back in history at, as I stated earlier, Joseph and the story of Joseph, as told through the King James Version, would give you the impression that God blessed Joseph. You know, God blesses us through other people. See, God blesses us through others. And that's how the Hebrews were blessed, the Hebrew nation. They were blessed through the African nation. And the African nation took them in, put them on the choicest piece of land that they owned, because the Egyptians owned all of that land throughout, down and about. In fact, it was all called at one time Ethiopia. So if the African told that story, he would tell the story how a nation of people, of Africans, took in a young boy who was deserted by his family, who was cast away by his own race of people, and took that child in and nurtured that child into manhood. That young boy, nurtured him into manhood, taught him how to read the hieroglyphs, indoctrinated him into the priesthood, educated him beyond his wildest imagination, brought him into a land of prominence. Yes, God did this for Joseph through the Egyptians, whom we were always led to believe were such an evil and wicked people, and who served all the many gods and all of this. No, they saved. If the Hebrews and the Jews, if you will, were God's chosen people, then it was the Africans that saved God's chosen people. And when the African told that story, it would be different from the way we receive that story. So we have to tell our story through our perspectives, the way God has shown us the same story, and stop regurgitating these things that we hear so-called preachers and teachers telling us about other nations and other races of people and what they did while condemning their own, and don't even realize it. So to continue my discussion on how the African and the African nation played a prominent role throughout the Bible, and it emphatically tells us this, then we go to the next main character from Joseph to Moses. Now I left out Abraham, but we won't go back in time. We just pick up from there and go into to Moses. And again, was it not the African nation that stretched forth its hand to nurture and care for Moses? This is not happenstance. This is in the Bible. And the Bible is the Word of God. If we say that the Bible is the Word of God, although those who continue to translate the Bible and revise the Bible, I don't know how much inspired they are and how much I have to adhere to that. But I can question the Bible. If I so choose to question the Bible, I can question the Bible. Why not? And who are you to tell me that I can't? If you want to just simply believe everything that's fed to you, and you're told to believe it on faith, if that's what you want to do, I'm not going to condemn you. That's your prerogative. It's your right. It's your brain, not mine. But God also gave us a magnificent brain, all of us. And God made us all different in shape, sizes, and color. And so for all of us to be walking around talking the same, looking the same, preaching the same, I don't think that blends in with the various rainbows of the world. So I want to look at the story and tell the African story from the African American perspectives for a change. And there are many stories out there that are told from the African American perspective, who questions certain elements of theology. I mean, after all, Christianity questioned the theology of Judaism. Baptism, not baptism, but the Baptists and the Methodists, or Protestants, if you will, questioned the theology of Catholicism. And then throughout Protestantism, everybody questioned one another. Baptists questioned where they were and formed the Baptists. The Methodists questioned where they were and formed Methodism. And the list goes on and on and on throughout Protestantism. So, and each of you interpret the Bible according to your denomination. So then what makes me or someone like me who comes and preaches from a perspective of the African perspective, what makes me so unusual and or abnormal? That's the thinking, that's the mind that we have become indoctrinated to, where we won't even listen to our own people who should have our best interests at heart when it comes to saying anything contrary to what Europe has taught us to believe on faith. If we read in the story of the Bible, where when the Jews were captive and they refused to bow to the gods of other gods, we said, "Oh boy, that look how God works." Those Hebrew boys, Moriah and Shenrek. Now I'm not talking about. I'm mentioning it's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I know that, but that's their slave names. Their African names were Moriah, Ezariah, and something else was a third name, and I always like to refer to their natural names, because after all, they did not bow down to the God of the king. And so if they didn't bow down to the God of the king, they didn't accept those names either that were given, those slave names that were given him. Just like Malcolm, when he was called Little Red growing up, Malcolm Little, when he came into himself as a prodigal son, he changed his name, and he refused to answer by any other name other than the name that he was given by Elijah Muhammad, and that was El-Ha-Shabazz, Malcolm El-Ha-Shabazz. Might be another part of that too. So you understand the point I'm making, is that there comes a time in our lives, brothers and sisters, where we have to start thinking through African eyes. Carter G. Woodson wrote the book, Miseducation of the Negro. Brother said not too long ago on BET with Tavis Smiley, he said the problem with the African in America is that we've lost our minds, and we need to get our minds back. But for the most part, we're afraid. We're afraid to get our minds back. We're afraid of what we've been taught about hellstone and hellfire and brimstone and heaven. Don't you see the trick? Don't you understand what was given to us and why it was given to us? For the purpose of control. So you tell people you're going to go to hellfire and burn for eternity. What God, what loving and merciful God would create a people and then have for them hellfire and brimstone for eternity? For eternity. And the only way to escape that is how? Yeah. When Charlie taught that to the slaves, he told them, "You be good slaves and you're going to go to heaven." And so all those slaves who bought into that system, believed that, worked those fields, praying and saying, "Oh, one day we're going to be free." Yet God birthed us free. God gave us free air. Freely he gave, freely we received. And so freely we should give. And so we became good slaves. Or some became good slaves and died good slaves, expecting a reward. God only knows how corrupt that system was. It's sort of like Satan saying, "Okay, you come down here in hell right now, all y'all be good, and you'll get a reward for being good." How you gonna be good in hell? Who wants to be good in hell? There's nothing but fire and brimstones, nothing but sorrow and agony and pain and all the things that they claim it is. So what difference does it make if you're good or not? You're still in hell. Based on the definition of hell, there's no good in hell. And we sure faced a lot of that when we came here as Africans. So then when we look at the story of Moses from the African American perspective, and we don't talk about, see, those from the perspective of the Jews, they jump over Egypt, you see, and then they paint this picture of this evil and wicked nation. Yet for 60 years it nurtured and fed and bred Moses and raised him up to become a man of God. Right, Moses became a man of God while he was in Egypt, not after he left Egypt. He was a man of God. So obviously there was something good in Egypt that the story writers apparently forgot to tell us. There was something emphatically good in Egypt, that they could produce a man like Moses. Because Moses had no interaction to God, if my understanding, when we read the Bible, until he was an old man after he left Egypt, or ran from Egypt, because of again, the story says about during the slave episode, he wind up killing an Egyptian in defense of one of his people. Well, quite frankly, who was his people? His people were Egyptians. He was an Egyptian. He was raised an Egyptian. He learned how to speak Egyptian. He learned the Egyptian gods. He learned the Egyptian dialect. He learned Egyptian history. He learned everything there was Egyptian. So if Moses was to tell you, quite frankly, he was an Egyptian. Moses had no qualms about who he was. Now, certainly when it came to the religion that he wanted to practice, as the story tells us, he had a following of people, and so he left. He chose to leave with that following. Nothing wrong with that. People have been doing that from the beginning of time. We're still doing that. Get mad in church, and what do? We get our followers, those ministers or whomever. You get your following, you leave, and you start your own church. So there's nothing new about that. And so Moses owes, and the Jews, and that's when Judaism began, with Moses. You see, before that they were Hebrews. Then the religion, Judaism, began with Moses. And the reason why it began is because he learned the religion of Egypt, which was Shitat Netur. He learned the Medu Netters, which is the writings of God. He learned those. We know he learned them. That's why when he wrote those 10 Commandments. Those 10 Commandments comes out of the Shitat Netur, the 42 laws of Ma'at. And they were in hieroglyphs. The 42 laws of Ma'at were in hieroglyphs that were called the Medu Netter, the handwriting of God. And the one who wrote the 42 laws of Ma'at was the god Dizyahuti, and who is the God's writing. And see, in African tradition, everything was equated to a various god. Now, there is only one God. But so when it would say that God wrote the Medu Netter, or God wrote the words, God wrote the words, but God, through the manifestation of Dizyahuti, who is the words of God. So you got to really understand the mindset and the thinking of the Egyptians. It was powerful. It was righteous. It was beyond our thinking, as it says in the Bible. My thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. As high as the heavens are above heaven, are my ways above your ways. And so we don't just discount the intelligence, the wisdom of this nation, because people wanted to prop up their religion or prop up their civilization, and the only way they could do it was to downgrade the Egyptian civilization. If you want to start a religion, as Moses did, and you want to interject your God into that religion and into the minds of people who came out of a nation of gods, and who were convinced that God smiled upon their nation, and surely God did. I mean, the Egyptians were not a great civilization overnight. They were a great civilization for many, many, many years, centuries, you see, millenniums. And what do we say about that? That, they were a wicked and evil people who were filled with superstitions and all? No, they were a God-fearing people, a godly people. And so when Moses left out of Egypt, he was well equipped and well prepared to lead a nation, and that's what he did. But we don't talk about how he became so well equipped and well prepared to lead a nation. He may have had a stammering problem, but he was still Moses. He was still a priest among priests, and he was an Egyptian. Yes, he was. Story. Look at the story. When you adopt someone into your house as a baby, I don't care who the mother and father was, that child takes on your name. That child is part of your family now. And you can say you can say whatever you want. But when you raise that child to become an adult in that family, and that child has your name, when you introduce that child, you introduce that child as your child. Now you can surely you can say she's adopted, but so what? Of course, now this it's all becoming commonplace now. With new egg fertilization and test tube babies and all that, it's becoming a common thing now. So it's okay now. So another major character who owes his life, his very life and education and well-being to the African people. And then who can forget Jesus before my time runs out? Who can forget Yeshua? Yeshua, raised amongst the African people. And God told, according to the Bible, God told them to go to Egypt. Now, why would God tell God's child, his babe, that's what the Bible teaches us now, to go into a land of heathens, of whoremongers? Why would God tell? Why would that even be? How could we even think that a nation could be as corrupt as we have been led to believe about the Egyptians throughout the Bible and all the paganisms and all the stuff that goes on, if God send the best of mankind down into Egypt? It had to be because they were true worshipers. It had to be because they worshiped God in spirit and in truth. Just because the civilizations who went over there misunderstood, could not interpret, of course not. If you're not godly, if you're not sanctified and saintly and righteous, how are you going to go into a nation and be able to understand that the spirituality of that nation when you've been a heathen all your life? And that's all you know is heathenistic ways and doing things. That's why when they went over there, that's why you had slavery. That's why you got nations going in, subduing other nations, ruining and destroying civilizations, raping people, the women over there, and doing stuff like that and the Indians dealt with that over here. How do you? No, they couldn't go over there and understand them. So what did they do? They call them savages. The Indians were called savages, right? They were godly people. The Indians were a God-fearing people, understood the land and nature, respected it, because what they saw God. And when they saw mankind come to them, they accepted them, recognizing God through man. So don't tell me and teach me that the African somehow was an abnormality, of mankind, and tell me all these things about barbarisms and all the wickedness that was claimed to have occurred in the African civilization. No. God told Jesus to go there and that he would be protected by those people those African people would protect him. And not only would they protect him, but they would raise him and nurture him just as if he was one of their own. And when when Jesus left from Egypt, when they heard him speak, they said, "Never have we heard a man speak with such authority as this man." Yeah, he learned well. They taught him, and he learned the Egyptian ways well. And when he came back, he opened up the eyes of the blind. He understood what it meant to go out to the poor, to the needy, to help the infirm, to open up the locked gates, those who were incarcerated. He understood all of that. Why? How? Because he came from a nation of people, of African people, of people of color, black men and women who feared God, who understood God, and who wanted to live righteous, who taught righteous. And when you left a nation like that, you had to be righteous and holy and understanding the spirituality of God and who you were. No